next speaker, who will be engaging us on the topic, Big Data and Digital Technologies, Implications for Modern Project Delivery. As a quick introduction, this man actually is an astute and academician, so you won't miss that at all. He has done a lot of research work and developed, published a lot of articles and in great journals that you would make reference to. He is an amazing person who understands building technology and has carried the passion throughout into a very professional angle with a PhD in construction project management from the University of Hong Kong. His academic prowess as an astute student goes as far as being two-time nominated within Hong Kong as the best research student that probably they had ever seen. Also representing the northern region of Ghana proudly in his regalia is not only the fact that he was nominated into the 100 most influential persons from the northern region of Ghana. Pleased to welcome him, please help me with a huge round of applause, to welcome the Deputy Rector of GIMPA and also a Professor of Construction Business and Project Management in the same institution. Please, Professor Martin Morgan Tuuli.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for that warm introduction. I think I have the hard task of keeping you awake in the next 30 minutes or so. I'll try to make sure you're not sleeping as we go through this. And luckily, one good thing about speaking at the latter part of the conference is that some of the things I was going to say have already been said. So I'll just skip through most of that. All right, so I wanted at this stage of the conference to take two of the digital issues, big data, digital technologies, and try and just show some of the ways in which project management is using these tools to deliver projects. So I'll touch briefly on digital disruptions, innovations and barriers, big data, digital technologies, and then I'll touch on the implications for their delivery and make a few suggestions for a way forward. I'm sure sometime in 2019 and maybe early 2020, there were some executives sitting somewhere saying digital transformation is years away and I don't have to change anytime soon. And I think COVID brought them reality check. And here we are talking about digital transformation and the ways in which it's transforming the way we run our businesses and run projects and so on. I'm sure we're all familiar with the major disruptions, most of them digital, and we can say we are in the platform era where most of these disruptions are based on just developing some form of platform that harnesses technology as well as big data to make a huge difference. And we know them. Yeah? World's largest taxi company, they don't own any taxi. Yeah? So you can see that the world is moving from owning big infrastructure and physical assets, for that matter, to owning digital assets, which are even way valuable in many cases than our physical assets. Yeah? Largest accommodation provider, they don't own any accommodation. Fastest growing bank, actually. A bank called Society One in Australia is now the fastest growing bank, and they don't have any money. They've just provided a platform for peer-to-peer lending. Yeah? And the list goes on. Netflix, Facebook, and so on. So I think this demonstrates that unless you can actually leverage a platform or the digital technologies and data we are talking about these days, you are in danger. All right. So there are these technologies that we call the disruptive dozen, which leverage, whether it's the internet, new materials and so on, to do a lot of wonderful things. And we'll take a look at some of that as we move along. All right. I think we saw some of this information yesterday talking about the evolution of our digital transformation all the way from Industry 101 to Industry 4.0, where we are now leveraging all the kinds of technologies that we are going to talk about today to deliver projects, to run our businesses, and so on. I think the earlier speaker, Cleopatra, I think, touched on this issue about how we adopt innovations. He talks about the fact that we are all doing this at a different pace, whether you are talking about countries, you are talking about organizations, or you are talking about individuals, and we are all doing this differently. And as she highlighted, the ones that will potentially will drag us behind, or who will be left behind, are those we call the laggers, who are generally the skeptics to technology or data and the various ways in which we use them. And those are the ones who, in particular, make it clear some of the barriers that we actually have to navigate if we want to move on to a more digital world and a more digital context in which we deliver projects and so on. Because they are the ones who are too busy, perhaps not listening to the change that is going on around them and so on. And busy on the fact that we've always done things in a particular way and probably do not see the reason why they ought to change at this point. I don't know if you've ever heard of the story of the 5 monkeys before, because they are too busy and they are doing things as they've always done, not questioning why they do the things they are doing. But this story about the 5 monkeys was an experiment conducted by some scientists who put 5 monkeys in a room and put a banana on a ladder. Now, anytime any of these monkeys tried to reach out to the banana, they would spray hot water on the remaining monkeys. So after a while, the monkeys figured out that there must be something going on. So they started preventing each other from grabbing the banana. Then the scientists stepped up their experiment and started replacing the monkeys. And at this point, they stopped spraying the hot water. And the monkeys were still preventing each other from reaching onto the banana. And they kept replacing the monkeys until they had 5 new monkeys in the room who have never been sprayed hot water. But they were still preventing the monkeys from getting to the banana. So if you were able to ask these monkeys why they were preventing each other from reaching the banana, I'm not sure what they were going to say. I'm sure they will say what most of us say, that this is how we've always done it. Just like how we all do an estimate for a project and put 10%. I don't know where that came from. Yeah? Where did that start? And what is the basis for that? That's what they've always done, isn't it? So in this age, if we cannot move away from what we've always done, then we'll be left behind. All right, so we know what they say, that data is the new oil. And the analogy is quite interesting because like oil, left in the raw state is almost useless. Yeah? But refined or taken through certain processes, it becomes what? Quite valuable. And you can see all these companies, whether it's Google, Amazon, and so on, thrive on what they can do with data. And at the moment, in the US, for example, they say every dollar spent, about half of that goes through Amazon. And just that alone, you can see what they can do with that kind of thing. Yeah? So we need to be able to leverage data and process it, refine it in a way that it becomes useful for us. I'm going to skip through this, but just to talk about the characteristics of what we call big data. And whilst there are many V's used to describe big data, I'll just touch on these three. The first is that big data has to do with high volume, which means they are produced in tetrabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and so on. And just to give you an idea, 1 exabyte is perhaps equivalent to 10 billion graphic. Yeah? 10 billion of them is the size of 1 exabyte. So that gives us a sense of the amount of data that big data and the companies that rely on this kind of data have to deal with. So there's high volume of this data being produced. There's also the issue of high velocity, in the sense that the information is constantly being produced, some in real time, and therefore the size of the data is increasing as times go by. So you're also getting, although you have the data now, more data is being generated, and you need to be able to figure out not just how you will use the current data, but the data that will be produced as time goes on. Big data is also has high variety, in the sense that you are getting data from different sources, you are getting data from different formats, all trying to inform a particular or project particular information if you can actually decipher that kind of data. So also your ability to deal with data coming from different sources and so on is another key issue. So all these characteristics of the data therefore makes big data quite complex and quite complicated to deal with. And I guess that's the reason why some people might just decide not just even engage with it, although there's a lot of power in that. So you have the raw data. It might not be useful. You need to be able to determine what that data is even about. You need to determine how you can actually use that data, and be able to also determine why or what that data might actually also be telling you. But the issue, as we said, is the value in being able to process that data and what it can do. And this leads us to the important value of analysis when it comes to data. Because if we get the wrong data or we analyze the data wrongly, then we won't be able to make the best out of it. And nothing illustrates that more than this picture from World War II, where the American army were trying to figure out what to do about their bombers that were returning badly damaged. And what you can see there are examples of bullet holes on their bombers. And what the army decided was that they should reinforce all the areas where they can see the holes, or the bullet holes. And then they brought in a statistician, a guy called Abraham Wald. And he said to the army that you should actually reinforce the areas where there are no bullet holes. As you can imagine, that is counterintuitive to the army, because the planes are coming back with bullet holes. And you are telling them they should rather reinforce the areas where there are no bullet holes. And what was his explanation and reason? The planes that were hit in the areas where there are no bullet holes did not actually make it back home. Those were actually the planes that were shot down by the enemy. So if we reinforce the areas where there are holes, the planes can still be shot down, because if they are shot at the areas where you don't see the bullet holes, that is rather where the plane can be heavily damaged. So this illustrates both the power of data and the power of you dealing with data from a one-sided point of view. And this led to an understanding and theory of what we call survivorship or survival bias. So it presents both an opportunity and a danger in how we use and data. All right. So in order for us to make the best out of data, we need to have what we call domain expertise. That gives us a bit of context about the data. We need the skills to be able to actually explore that data in various ways and to be able to analyze this data to present many understandings for us. Again, I'll skip through this, but just to give you a picture of the kinds of things we are talking about when we refer to them as digital technologies. And these include anything from websites to e-books to video streaming, Internet of Things, ATMs, digital cameras, drones, and so on. All these that allow us to use electronic or technology to do things come under the umbrella of digital technologies. Now, why will these influence project delivery or the way we run our businesses? If you take projects, I guess the reason is the fact that the performance of our projects are unsatisfactory to a large extent, and earlier speakers have referred to the percentage of projects that are performing unsatisfactorily. And this data from Oxford University zeroes in on the performance of projects across many disciplines, and it's not a pretty picture. Yeah, road projects overrunning their cost by 20%, all the way to dam projects, IT-led projects, 107% overrunning their cost, and of course the pole position goes to the Olympic Games, whose projects overrun on the average 156%. In fact, given that we are in the Olympic era, maybe this slide illustrates this even more. This is the record of the cost overruns of Olympic projects since 1968. Yeah? And the bigger the circle, the bigger the percentage of cost overrun. And of course, the Canada Olympics in '76 still stands as the record, overrunning their budget by 720%. Of course, the current Olympics going on in Tokyo is considered the most expensive Olympics, as you can tell, and they are overrunning their cost by about 62%. Yeah? And these percentages represent huge amounts of money that were otherwise not budgeted for, and so on. All right, now if you look at the global picture on digitization and digital transformation and so on, a lot is happening across the world, but a lot of the world is also being left behind in a number of ways. Because if you take a look at this, you will see very little of our continent representing in a better way when it comes to issues of digital transformation. And so far, Ghana doesn't even appear here yet. So we have a lot to do in that regard. We are doing some things, but we still have a long way to go. If you take industry specific, the picture is perhaps also problematic for some of the industries that we work for in the project context. And anytime I look at this diagram, I'm particularly saddened, because if you look at the list of industries and their state of digitization or digitalization, you will see that construction is the last but one, next to agriculture and hunting. I mean, anytime I take a look at this, I'm wondering whether I'm in the wrong profession. But that perhaps also shows that there's a lot of opportunities there to deal with issues around digitalization and digital transformation of the industry in that regard. But an explanation for some of the issues around why Africa or some of the African countries are so far behind in this area of digital transformation, perhaps can also be seen in the data around innovation. And the Global Innovation Index gives us some sense of how some of our African countries are performing in that regard. And if you take a look at that, you see that a lot of us are still way, way behind. South Africa is the only country that appears to be doing more when it comes to innovation and so on. And you can see why that is the case. How much do we actually spend on research and development, particularly the African countries and so on? Not very much. Yeah? That's the graph of spending on research and development. And you will not see any African country appearing anywhere near there. Yeah? Interestingly, in 1980, then AOU mandated all African countries to spend at least 1% of their GDP on research and development. That was 1980. Yeah? 40 years. And we are still spending on average only about 0.3% on research and development. And the data shows that Ghana is spending around that average, 0.3% on GDP, of our GDP on R&D. So there are therefore implications for how we deliver projects from the perspective of big data and the digital technologies that are available. Of course, it allows us to do a number of things, including being able to harness data to inform decision-making in particular, and therefore add value to that. And this graph shows the value addition that different industries can get from being able to harness data properly. From some of the more or other ways in which big data can support project delivery can be seen in the application of big data, for example, to the SDGs, whether it is assessing where we are in our achievement of them and what different countries or sectors are actually doing in order to achieve that. So from that perspective, and given that a lot of our funding for projects is channeled towards allowing countries to achieve various levels of these SDGs, we can therefore see the implications of what big data can help us understand about how we are doing when it comes to projects like this. This ability to help us ask better questions or new questions, and therefore also get better answers to questions we already had. For example, Google, because of the volume of data they collect, are famous for being able to even predict a number of pandemics or outbreak of diseases, even before many national governments are able to do so. And I think a couple of years, there was a famous story in the US where a teenager was taken, I don't know whether it was Google or one of those people, to court because it told the parent that your daughter may be pregnant. Yeah? Based on the kind of searches the daughter was already making on the internet. And the young lady went to court because she thought this was breaching her privacy. But these are the kinds of things that data is allowing us to do. But I guess it's also raising the questions around privacy and issues like that. And particularly in our part of the world where people, even information that is supposed to be available publicly is something that we guard against people seeing. Again, data is allowing us to be able to learn early and to be able to also react quickly to a lot of problems that we encounter in our projects. And this is particularly helped by the ability to actually generate real-time data so that you don't have to actually wait until things are far gone in terms of performance before you are able to react. And also, data is allowing us to get an outsider view because you are able to then gather information across a lot of projects that allows you to make certain decisions and conclusions about the direction in which your project might be going. And more importantly, data is now allowing us to be able to mix what we might refer to as facts through the data and our experience as project managers or what our gut feelings may be. So it can help confirm some of this for us in that regard. And one of the, I know many of us or many of the companies represented here are doing a lot with data. But when it comes to projects, one company that I found to also do a lot with regards to projects is a company called Upturn AI. And I want to play a very short video.
Did you hear about the massive infrastructure project that was delivered on time and on budget? No, neither did anyone else, because it hardly ever happens. We hear about the $98 million IT system that blows out to $1.2 billion and still doesn't work, the tunnel project that finished 6 years late, the resources project costed at $37 billion and ending up at $54 billion. The list goes on and on. We've come to expect projects to blow their budgets and deadlines, no matter the industry, no matter the country, but we shouldn't accept it. We should do something different. So we have. With Upturn AI, we bring world-leading artificial intelligence to major projects. The experience of past projects, combined with new technologies, helps us break the cycle of project failure in a way not even imaginable a few years ago. Big data and machine learning is driving a fundamental change to the way we manage projects. We can now dynamically predict critical factors and find better ways to avoid problems and manage issues. With AI, we can overcome human limitations, mitigate the effects of random events, and manage complex problems with complex solution-finding algorithms. Upturn AI is a genuinely new way to manage projects at a fraction of the current costs. It delivers insights earlier, faster, and more accurately in a way impossible to achieve except through AI. So project managers, owners, deliverers, and financiers can make the right decisions at the right time. Our technology has been built by project experts for project experts to make us better at big. Data-driven project management. It's your new reality and it's available today. Upturn AI, powered by Endeavour Program.
So that's the era in which we are, data-driven project management. So we are making decisions based on data and so on. Now, this means that big data, digital technologies can allow us to do a lot of things that a couple of years ago were perhaps inconceivable. And in the architecture or engineering context in particular, and construction context in particular, we are seeing how we are using drones to monitor project progress and access many parts of buildings that otherwise won't be able to do so. The use of robotics, remote sensing, being able to use RFIs to give us a lot of information about what is going on, using smart sensors in concrete and other forms of building materials and so on. And in particular, what we call these days building information modeling, which is changing the way projects are designed and actually delivered and so on. And in many cases, as we saw through yesterday and today, big data and digital technologies are actually changing some business models in the project context. So for example, some large construction companies actually do employ fewer employees on site than they normally will. A large construction company in the UK, for example, called Balfour Beatty, calls themselves now systems integrators instead of contractors, because all they are doing is bringing together various companies to actually deliver the project in a way that was not conceived in many ways. A lot of organizations or construction companies now making more money managing facilities than actually doing construction and so on. So these digital technologies and big data is changing the business models of many organizations. And when it comes to project delivery, one of the changes again has to do with what is called the common data environment. And this allows project participants to be able to access information about their projects, which is known by everyone. Unlike some of the times where engineers could be working on a drawing that is several months old, and they will not even know about it. And what common data environment does is allow all participants in the project to be able to access the same information at the same time. So we are moving towards a point where we expect to be able to, of course, have robotics and so on, automated delivery of projects, and we are seeing some through some of the 3D printing of buildings and so on that is going on, how we are able to use augmented reality to have our building users and customers have an experience of the kind of project we are delivering and how it will actually look like in real life, which was not possible many years ago because they will only have to wait until the building is actually completed to be able to do that. The other way in which technology is helping project delivery is in the health and safety aspect of it, allowing construction workers to be able to do a lot of things that they otherwise would not be able to do, and also provide a lot of information for the delivery of projects. Another implication is what someone referred to earlier in one of the panel discussions, digital twins, where these days you can have a building in the physical and its twin on the computer, and changes that are going on in the physical are being reflected in the virtual, and allow a lot of things to be done. So nowadays we can print buildings, yeah. So this allows us to be able to build buildings of various shapes and sizes, because we are able to remove the human intervention or ability to do so. So you will see that going forward, and we've seen that throughout yesterday and today, that in order for us to be relevant, we need to build our digital skills in this era if we want to be relevant to our companies and relevant in terms of being able to deliver projects to the satisfaction of our clients and so on. So I wanted to offer a few thoughts on the way forward and how we navigate and use big data and digital technologies and so on. Of course, at the individual level, and I think this is part of what we are doing now, building our skills, our knowledge, and our understanding on digital technologies and many other forms. So we need to invest. These are some of the times that we need to invest in ourselves rather than waiting for our organizations to invest in us, because they can always go out there and find people to hire to do the jobs they want to do. And if you are not ready, you'll be left out. But of course, at our professional institutional level as well, we need to recognize this trend and make digital skill set part of our knowledge areas that we need to upskill, and also offer digital technology CPDs and so on for our members. Of course, at the company levels, we need to continue to invest both in our staff and in the technology, invest in software, invest in hardware to enable us to take advantage of these. and in particular also have what we sometimes refer to as champions or mentors in this regard to help us navigate this era. But of course, also at the governmental level, where a lot of policy is made and also some of the infrastructure that we'll rely on to be able to apply these tools, they need to also invest. And like we saw yesterday on the systems engineering application to corruption, we need to look at our educational system as well. So it should be possible now to be allowing our young ones to begin to learn coding and stuff like that, because that is the direction in which the world is going. And in particular, in many countries, governments are switching between whether, in terms of policies, to have what we call a mandate or to apply what is called a notch or a hybrid. So a notch or notch theory is where they get you to do things that you otherwise might not do. So for example, in Singapore, they've decided that building approvals and the processes that are involved, if you apply building information technology, building information modeling in your project will be approved much quicker. So they are not saying you must do it, but if you want to cut down the approval process, you apply it. So this is a typical example of what notch theory is about. They set policies that you then make the choice whether you do it or not, but you will see that there are more advantages in doing it than not doing it, and so on. So I think if we all do this at the various levels, we'll be on a path to actually helping ourselves, our organizations, and the nation move towards a more digital economy. And of course, since I'm a professor at GIMPA, I cannot go without telling you that we offer PhD, master's programs that we try and explore some of these things. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, Professor Tuuli. I'm available to pick questions. We'll do this in the next 5 to 6 minutes. Please, shall we have that on the clock? And we'll pick questions. Also, if you're watching us with a virtual experience, please know that if you're back on, you can send your questions through and we'll receive them and respond to them. So let's have the very first question for Prof.
Kojo Akomiajan. I've also been to GamePass. So nice slide. What would you say is the most critical? Is it to generate data real time, or to make decisions out of the data in real time? And then why?
Repeat that, I missed the last part.
Okay, so which is more critical?
Yeah.
Is it to generate data in real time, or is it to make decisions out of data in real time? Like,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I suppose your second question presupposes that you will have the data anyway. Otherwise, you can't make the decisions in real life. So I'll go with the second option, because the second option subsumes the first as well, because it presupposes you have the data anyway. I think that if you have the data and process in a way that allows you to be able to make decisions in real time, then you are perhaps in the better or in the best position to influence processes before it's too late. So having the capacity to process the data in a way that it informs the decisions you are able to make will be what I think will put you in a better place. Okay.
Thank you very much. Shall we please applaud him?